I'm hoping in a few minutes to be joined by my co-presenter, Leo Farberg. Leo's a psychologist. He's also a family man. He has 4 children and he has a busy practice. Leo, I can see you. Can you see or hear me? I think he can't. Okay, we'll see what happens. Um, so today, certainly I, and hopefully Leo as well, will be talking about loss and grief, but not just loss and grief relating to the death of somebody close to us, for example. It could be loss of a job, or it could be the loss of a partner through breakup of some kind. There's lots of different sorts of loss, obviously, that we can talk about today. And we're going to talk about that in relation to the grief that sometimes goes with it as well. But I'm going to start with a little bit about me first. I didn't do that, did I? And so I'm Steve Costello. I've been working with young people in particular in the early parts of my career, and then along with families, psychological effects of challenges that they've faced, counselling, and so on and so forth, and an awful lot of personal development. Over the years, I've added mindfulness practice to all of that because it's useful and it helps people to work through particular challenges. So it looks, I don't know whether Leo can hear me or not. I don't think he can. No, he's not lifting up his head. Um, and a few years ago, I had an accident and that put me out of the workplace, which was particularly challenging. That's another form of loss, isn't it? I lost a job because I was medically unable to do it. So that was difficult. So how do we manage when those things happen? Let's explore that in a few minutes. Now, if you would like to, you can contact Leo and I in several different ways. So I'll highlight some of those as we go through today's show. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in because Steve Beer will be pleased to send them through so that we can respond to those questions. Or maybe it will be me. Such is the way of things. Sometimes you just got to laugh, right? Anyway, so what happened? A few weeks ago, I received a call to say that my mum was quite sick. And the challenge for me wasn't that I could simply jump in the car and go see my mum, but it meant organising flights to the UK because I live in the south of France with my own family. So we had to organise flights and get up to the northwest of England. So that happened without too many hitches, and I arrived in the northwest and went to visit mum. The first thing that struck me was that she was very sick, far more sick than I'd been told. Maybe people didn't want to tell me over the phone or over the internet, I'm not sure. But she was far more sick than I'd been told. She'd already been in hospital for several weeks. So all of that, the effect of seeing her in the bed and she wasn't able to be the person that I knew she could be. The jokes were rather thin on the ground as opposed to fairly quick and dry, it must be said. So it was challenging, and the ward she was in was a busy ward. There were people on the ward who were in the late stages of life, although she wasn't in that category. She just happened to be in the same ward. So that in itself was difficult as well. So I felt worried. I felt worried for my dad because they'd been together for a very long time, over 60 years. So I was worried about the whole picture. It wasn't just about my mum being ill. My own feelings were something else. So I was worried about how I felt, and I was worried about the fact that my family were in France, and so your head starts to spin a little bit. But with my dad, we went to visit several times over the next few days. I was there for about a week, and I saw her plenty. And toward the end of the time that I was there, she seemed to be picking up an awful lot. To the point that the hospital was saying the following day, which was the day I was to leave, she would be going home. I was a little bit concerned about that because I didn't personally feel that she was ready. But who am I to say? I'm not a medical professional. But still, I felt a little bit uncomfortable about the whole thing. However, I went back to France and she went home. Unfortunately, she didn't stay at home for very long. It was only a few days, and something happened and they had to take her back into hospital. And over the next few days, it seemed to be that she wasn't recovering. It was getting more and more difficult. Leo's back in the picture. I can hear him, but I don't think he can hear me. Can you hear me, Leo? No, I don't think he can. So what I think we're going to do for the rest of this show, after I've talked a little bit, I'm going to talk to Leo via the chat and then get him to talk. Let's see if we can manage it like that. It's going to be a first. It's going to be challenging, but let's see what we can do. So, as I said, she was taken back into hospital. And then on my birthday, which was 48 hours after she was taken back in, I received a phone call from Mum to say happy birthday, which was fantastic. She's in her 80s, by the way. And what was clear in the call was that it was a kind of a goodbye call. She didn't say that. It was more about what she didn't say, but she also left me a couple of instructions. So Mum was there. And the instructions were quite simple things: keeping an eye on Dad, keeping an eye on my younger brother. So she was kind of instructive about her wishes. So that was on the Wednesday, and on the Friday I received a call quite early in the morning to say that my mum had died. And that was a shock, obviously, because I spoke to her on Wednesday, but at the same time, a little message at the back of my head said, I know what was going to happen, and therefore I shouldn't have been surprised, or should I? So that's something worth thinking about. Something happens out of the blue. Are we always surprised? Are we aware? Let's just think about that for a minute. So I also discovered, after I was told that Mum had passed, that she'd also called all of my siblings 2 days earlier, the day of my birthday. And she'd done the same with them. She left them small messages. So that in itself was interesting. It kind of told you something. But the interesting thing when I heard the news was that I didn't feel upset. I kind of felt sad, but most of all, I felt quite numb. So I couldn't sense what was happening. I couldn't feel anything. I began to wonder what it was all about and what was I going through, but I definitely felt numb. Now, interestingly, is that numbness is one of the things that's highlighted in the 7 stages of grief. And I know those stages. I'm a qualified counsellor. I'm also a qualified grief counsellor. So I was kind of trying to relate back to myself the things I would relate to other people. We've got Leo on the screen again. I'm just passing a message across. We can hear him, he can't hear us. So I travelled to the UK again, feeling quite numb, feeling quite lost, but not sad, not really, not depressed, absolutely not depressed. But the reality began to sink in a few days later when I went to visit the body of my mum at the funeral home. So when I saw her, the reality kind of hit. I was looking at, forgive me, this sounds a little bit callous, I was looking at an empty shell that had been my mum. And that kind of helped it all to come together. Everything began to sink in. But the interesting thing was that before I saw her, I was kind of in denial. I wasn't shocked. I was denying what had happened, but I wasn't really conscious of it. So that gets a bit confusing, right? So, Leo, if you can hear this, you can try talking. If you can't get through, you could type messages into the chat and I'll read them out. Is that okay? Just nod if so. I'm not sure that he's hearing me. Okay, let's keep going. So I was in denial, and I didn't really come out of the denial until I saw my mum at the funeral home. Another interesting thing is that 2 weeks before she passed, so that was during my first visit, my motivation was in my boots. Now I'm self-employed. I have to be motivated. It's a must. If I'm not motivated, nothing happens. If I'm not motivated, I don't find clients. If I'm not motivated, I deliver a terrible service to my clients. So I need to be motivated, but I wasn't motivated at all. My motivation was in my boots. I couldn't really put a finger on it. What was it that was putting the motivation so far away? Interesting. But also interesting is that it's another thing that goes within the stages of grief. But I wasn't really noticing why it was there. I just knew it was there. I'm a human being and maybe a psychologist and maybe a qualified psychologist, but I'm human and I feel the same as anybody else. We'll have slightly different ways of feeling things perhaps, but I feel things too. So one of the third stage of grief is anger. Now, personally, I'm not a very angry person. I don't shout and rant and stamp my feet, and I might swear occasionally. So as he says, laughing because I usually laugh when I'm doing it. But I'm not a very angry person. It's just not my style. But although I accept what's happened, and it is what it is, I can't change it. It's part of the circle of life. And I guess that I was really fortunate because in the past Mum and I had some challenges, and we managed those challenges. We dealt with them. We brought them out into the open and put them away to sleep, which was fantastic. So I had no need to bargain, to make any bargains to say, oh no, we left on in a bad place, or we didn't manage this or that. I was in a good place. So there was nothing to bargain for. That's another stage of grief. So as I said earlier, I don't feel depressed by these events, although I know that other people do, within my own family, for example. So what is it that makes them feel depressed and myself not? Now, what I think we'll do, because we've lost my special guest for today, I know some of the things that he'll say on this subject. But what I think we'll do is wait until the next episode and we'll explore this in some more detail. So why do some people feel depressed and others don't? Leo, can you hear me yet? He's still looking like he can't. Okay. So I accept things as they are and have no problem talking about it. Now, one of the aspects of my job is to enable people to talk about their challenges, what bothers them, what causes them grief or pain, how they manage loss. So as a result, I need to be able to do the same. My personal attitude is that if I can't do it, I can't help other people to do it. That's worth thinking about. The bottom line is, though, about the way I've processed what happened, is that processing grief has no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong way to process. And as I said a couple of times already, the stages of grief don't necessarily fall in the order they were developed. We're all human, we're all different. Therefore, the 7 stages of grief isn't a prescription that we need to follow from 1 to 7. In fact, we might not even go through all of them. We might miss one. Who knows? The important thing is to be able to talk about it. One moment. So way back in the 1960s, we're talking way back, 5 stages of grief were developed. And they were developed by Swiss psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So that was some time ago. Today there are 7 stages, and as I've kind of indicated, there's still plenty of debate about these 7 stages. So let's not take them too literally. Okay, so I've talked about grief relating to a family member, in particular to the death of a close family member. But death isn't the only thing we grieve. So just think for a moment of things that have happened to you in your life, things that you've grieved about. Now, unfortunately, Leo can't actually hear us. He's only able to respond to the chat. So I think we're going to have to give you the gift of listening to me and nobody else. I'm sorry that this has gone wrong, but sometimes things don't work. Such is life. So think about something that you've lost and something that you've grieved over. And think for a moment about how you felt about that. Have you been able to talk about it? Have you shared it with anybody else? Or is it something that you've kept bottled up inside to the point where perhaps it's eaten at you, challenged you? Here's a great example. So a little while ago, I was checking some messages on a platform that I use for my work, and there was a very short video from somebody, and he was talking about the fact that his business has gone bankrupt. Now, that's a big deal, obviously. That must hurt. I don't know what that feels like personally, but it must hurt. So this guy's business had gone bankrupt. He shared it with the world. The reason why he shared it with the world was to kind of get it out of his system, because it was eating at him. It was hurting him. He was feeling pain because of it. And he wanted to share with the world what had happened, not to make people feel sorry for him, but in a way to help him manage it himself. And there's been a few comments to this particular post and the short video that he posted. And one of his responses in the comments is that actually doing that did help. So talking about it and sharing it with the world has helped him, which is fantastic. So thinking about that is important. Sharing it with other people is important. He didn't moan. He didn't say, "Oh, woe is me." He laid out the facts. He told the world what had happened. He hinted at why it had happened, and so on. So talking about it, as Steve, our producer, has said, is that talking about grief and loss hurts, but yes, it helps recovery, helps us to move on. You could say that loss, losing something important, teaches us about the value of things. Just think about that one for a little moment. Loss teaches us about the value of things. Here's an interesting story. I'm going back to death. I'm not going to follow on death, and it's not my story, but it's a story that I'm familiar with. So There was a guy who passed away in the 1980s, and he used to smoke a pipe. He only smoked a particular type of pipe tobacco, therefore the smell was familiar around him. So if he came along and you couldn't see him, he was perhaps behind you and he was smoking his pipe, you would smell it and you would know he was there. Great story. So the kind of pipe tobacco went with him. So after he died, his son didn't feel the grief of the death for about 12 months. Interestingly, there's all kinds of things went on. So he didn't feel anything for about 12 months. But after 12 months, he was out in a music club, and somebody had been in the male restrooms smoking a pipe with the same tobacco. And that was the smell he noticed. And that smell brought on the grief. It brought on sadness and brought on upset. And he suddenly realized that he'd lost his dad. And I think that's an incredible story. But one of the important things to know that we do know through psychological research and related researches, neuroscience and so on, is that our olfactory memory, in other words, our smell, connects to our experience memories. I'm not using the technical terms here. So we smell something and that links to memories of experience, and that triggers those memories, and this is what happened in this case. I think that's a really interesting story to highlight. Just think about these things as we go through them. Now, one of the important things that Leo and I do is that we encourage all of our clients, and some of them who are not clients yet, to ask questions. And ask questions because there is no such thing as a bad question. I've come across people who've hesitated when you said, come on, ask me a question, and they hesitate because they think the question might be stupid. They think the question might be off the mark. They think the question might make them look in a particular way and they don't want to be seen that way. But still we say, please ask questions. So if you've got any questions about what I'm talking about right now, please ask them, and you will get the answers from our point of view. Okay, that's important. Our point of view is based on experience and practice and so on and so forth. If you ask a personal question, you'll get a personal answer as well. Okay, so please do ask questions. There's no such thing as a bad question. Jim on the radio, that's Jim's a listener. Hi, Jim. Is asking, how long does grief last? That's difficult, very, very difficult to answer. How long does grief last? In my case, it's still around, obviously, because this what happened in my family only happened 15 or 16 days ago. So it's still there, it's still quite fresh. I know other people who are still grieving over things more than 12 months and longer since a particular event. So it's very difficult for one person to be used as a template for everybody. That just doesn't work. So we all grieve in different ways in different time frames. And that's dependent on all kinds of things that all link together to affect how we grieve and why we grieve for longer or shorter than other people. If you only grieve for two days, doesn't make you an inferior person compared to somebody who grieves for 2 weeks or 2 months. It's just difficult to say. Now, there are some very chronic situations where people grieve for a very long time, and there's all kinds of reasons for that as well. There are reasons that need to be explored clinically with somebody who's qualified to do so. It may be a psychologist, it may be a therapist, it may be a psychiatrist. It depends. Everybody's individual. This is important to the way Leo and I work, because we take each individual as an individual. We don't work with people based on a template. You will be grieving for 2 months or 2 days, for example. So I'm sorry, Jim, it's really difficult to give you a how long does grief last. But what you can do is contact Leo and I on Facebook. I'm not looking for business right now, but contact us on Facebook and we'll just generate some conversation between you and we might be able to help you through if you've got particular challenges. Okay, so please do that. Now there's another one from Sam. She says she wants to die because her partner died last night. That is difficult. Yes, I understand, Sam. I particularly understand because my brother said the same a few days ago, that he wanted to die because our mum had died. You know, and he felt very different. He didn't know how to manage it, how to handle it. One thing that I can say is that given time, the feeling does improve. The feeling does move away a little bit. It's not going to stop hurting, of course not. We've got to be realistic about this. But because somebody died last night doesn't mean, well, we know that it doesn't mean that you will. But also, what would that person think if you thought that? That's what I asked my brother. What would our mum say if you said that? I have a good idea what my mum would have said. Obviously, I don't know your partner, Sam, and I'm sorry that your partner passed away yesterday. But think about it. What would your partner want? I know it's difficult, I understand that. But again, like I said to Jim, if you wish to talk to Leo or I, please leave us a message. Leave us a private message. We will accept it. So use Facebook, use email. All of those will be appearing at the bottom of the screen. But also, I can highlight a couple for you now for anybody who is listening on the radio, like Jim, for example. So let's have a look. So if you want to contact myself or Leo via Facebook, you can mark your message for me, Steve, or Leo if you want to address a particular one of us, or just leave it blank and one or both of us will respond. So you can use facebook.com/Steve P. Costello. So that's facebook.com/Steve P. Costello. You can email Leo Farberg. I'm going to spell that for you. It's one word, all in lowercase. LeoFaerberg @gmail.com. So that's email leofarberg@gmail.com. Or you can email me at Steve, lowercase, EXGRO. So that's Steve Exgro @gmail.com. And you can also get us on WhatsApp, but I'll give you that one in a little while. So that's email and Facebook. Please don't hesitate to leave us a message if you need to do so. I'm being asked to turn up my volume, but I can't turn it up anymore. I'm afraid it's on full. So one of the important things, and I guess I'm putting this to Sam. So just think about this, Sam. It might be helpful. It takes courage to keep going. And at times like this, what is courage? Where is it? It's almost as though it's left under a chair or somewhere you can't put your finger on it. You know you've had it in the past because you've been courageous. But how do we find courage when we've just been hit hard by the loss of somebody who mattered a great deal? So again, that's something that Leo and I do. We help you find the courage. We can talk about courage, and I think we're going to do this in the coming weeks. I think it's worth talking. It's a big subject, and it's worthwhile talking about. There are lots of things we can do, lots of small things we can do on courage. For anybody who's suffering right now, try this simple exercise. So you need to find a place where you can see the sky. So just find a place where you can see the sky. And once you've done that, focus on your breathing. And just try to get your breathing to a nice, steady flow. Now, normally I would give a lot more information about this, but just think about a nice, steady flow. Just breathe in, hold the breath, and gently breathe out. It's nice, steady breathing. When you feel that your breathing is fairly steady and relaxed, look at the sky again. Now, I don't want you to make any judgments about the sky. If it looks like it's going to rain, it doesn't matter. If it looks like it's going to thunder, it doesn't matter. If it looks sunny and blue and wonderful, it doesn't matter. Just look at the sky. It is what it is. Don't make any judgments. And just focus on your breathing and look at the sky. Focus on your breathing and look at the sky. Do that for a few minutes. And when you're ready, just go back to whatever it was you're doing. All that's doing, that little exercise, is helping you to ground, to put yourself in the present moment. So just focus on looking at the sky without judgment. Be curious. If a weird shaped cloud floats into your view that looks like a duck, oh, there's a duck. That's all. Okay, it doesn't matter what sort of duck it is. It doesn't matter whether it's got a big beak or a big tail. It's just a duck. Okay, so just relax about that. That's a great exercise, as I said, for grounding, so worthwhile. You can do it in all kinds of situations. If you feel stressed, if you feel nervous, if you feel anxious, it's really useful exercise just to bring you back to the moment and calm things down a little bit. So when we lose something or somebody, what we have to remember is that, as difficult as it may seem, loss teaches us about the value of things. So what value can we put on the things we learn from other people? There's all kinds of values, isn't there? What value can we put on having worked for a company for the last 15 years or more, and suddenly somebody says, I'm sorry, you can't do this job anymore, you're no longer fit? Does that mean we've just lost all the value that we neglected along the way? Absolutely not. No, it doesn't. But it's difficult, isn't it? If we're challenged and we have to find something good out of a difficult situation, it's hard. I don't mind admitting that. It's been hard for me. It was hard for me years ago when I was told, no, you can't do your job anymore. All that training, all that time, all that effort, all those unpaid hours worked and so on. And all you feel like doing is screaming and shouting and having a tantrum. It doesn't help. So what good can we take out of it? What can we learn from it? How can we move forward? How can we take what we've learned and put it into something else? I managed to take what I'd learned and put it into my own business. It took a few shots. I tried a few different projects and they didn't all work out in the beginning. But I had to keep tweaking and moving on, tweaking and moving on. So sometimes that past experience is highly, highly valuable, but because of the pressure of the loss, we kind of forget it. It gets pushed to the background. So we need to find ways to bring it forward. How do we do that? That's another question, and I think another topic for another week. So we do need to look into how we manage these difficult situations. Now remember, please, if you've got questions, anytime ask the questions. If you ask a big question today and I don't feel that I have the time to answer it, we'll use it as a question to start a show. Because this is about you. I can talk all day about my experience and my practice. Leo can do the same when he can connect. I'm still laughing about that. You have no idea what's going on here, because all the bits that Leo was supposed to cover are not happening. I don't know what he was covering because we didn't feel the need to share scripts. Such is life, eh? So have a think. What do you need? What would help you? What will keep you going? What will push you forward? Okay. So let's just pause for a moment. A few weeks ago, I was a guest on another show on the Crossroads channel. In fact, I was a guest twice on Angela. I've forgotten her surname. I'm sure that Steve Beer is going to help me out on that one, and Angela is going to beat me when next time I speak to her. But I was a guest twice on Angela's show. It's on a Friday evening at 7 p.m. Wonderful. On the first show, she asked me to talk about what happened. And we had a technical challenge there as well. Interesting, right? So Angela Sprague, that's it. So Angela and I talked about what happened, and we talked about how I had a pretty good career. I was well paid, extremely well paid, actually. I was working for the British Ministry of Defence based in Germany with families and young people. So I had a good job, well paid, so on and so forth. And then one day I didn't. I was told that I could no longer do the job, and that was it. Time to retire. I was only 40 at the time. Spooky. And that became difficult. It affected a lot of things. It affected me, it affected my family, it affected my partner and our relationship. It affected our children, as tiny as they were at the particular time. It affected my confidence in a big way. As I said some time ago, I was also qualified at that time. One of the skills I needed was grief counseling, because if anything happened in the military, that was one of my roles. So I kind of should have understood some of the feelings that I had at that time. However, those feelings were buried. And where were they buried? They were buried behind medication. So let's think about medication for a minute. I used to say that the medication I was on put a blanket over the pain. So it didn't take it away, it didn't fix it. It kind of threw a blanket over it and dumbed it down a little bit. But one of the things it also dumbed down was feelings and thoughts, thinking. And it made it difficult to connect with where I perhaps should have been. It made recovery very slow. I did recover. I'm one of the lucky ones. I can tell the story. I can run around now. I can ride my mountain bike. I can ski down mountains. But a few years ago, I couldn't. And I thought I was never going to do that again. But the medication slowed me down. So let's think about how often do we use medications, and how often do they actually slow us down? Now, sometimes we need them. Sometimes there are medical conditions that can't avoid using medication. But sometimes I wonder, do we need to think closely? Do we need to think carefully? There's another subject for another day, a big one. But related to that is this thing called addiction. Now, there's plenty of theories and a lot of writing about addiction. But we can become addicted to pain medications. I've done some work on Facebook in a particular group as a guest, talking about addiction relating to pain, addiction relating to pain management. Because a lot of people are addicted and they don't realize they're addicted. But why are they addicted? Is addiction because people are weak? Is addiction because people are overly challenged and they don't know what to do about it, therefore they reach for a pill? What is it? There's a great definition of addiction by a Canadian chap called Gabor Mate. If you want to look him up, I'm just going to drop something in the chat for Steve. So Gabor Mate, he talks about addiction, and he's had years and years of working with addicts in Canada. And one of the things he says very, very loudly and very clearly is that addiction is a way of soothing some pain. It's not a weakness. Addiction doesn't highlight weak people. Addiction is soothing something that's happened to them in their lives. So maybe some people use alcohol, some people use medications, but what they're doing is soothing something. So let's think about that as well. Relate it back to grief and loss. What do we do when we're grieving? Sometimes we turn to drink. Maybe we drink too much alcohol. Maybe we smoke. Maybe we do something else that isn't really good for our health, but we do it to put that blanket over the pain. It's not helpful. It's not a good thing. But momentarily, maybe it helps. Long term, we know it doesn't. Long term, we know it creates more problems than it solves. So that's another issue relating to grief and loss. We react sometimes in all kinds of ways, and what we're doing is seeking to soothe what's happening or what's happened to us. We seek to soothe the grief or the loss. Like I said, it could be the loss of a person, the loss of a job, and so on. I'd love to know what you think on this, because as I said, we can use it and we can help develop further. Okay. So in the absence of more questions, I think I'll ask Steve to come in and see if he's picked up anything from any of the other channels that I can't see. Are you there, Steve? So, what are we seeing?
Right, what we're seeing, right? Okay, so on the radio, everybody's saying well done to your conversation. You know, about grief and loss is, you know, it's a subject that many people find it hard to talk about. But you know, then some people are saying that you know, grief can kind of like last for a long time. Um, uh, there are some families asking me for contact details, people for yourself. So I'm trying to sort that one out. And also, there's a lot of people kind of saying, I would lovely to hear somebody talk about loss and grief for a change. So I think you got started a fan club up here, I think, Steve.
Okay. So, as I've been saying, Steve, there's kind of a gap in what I've been talking about, because Leo and I, when we were talking about this a few days ago, we used headers. So, for example, he knew what I was going to say loosely. I knew what he was going to say loosely. But without the other, it's kind of part of the puzzle's missing. So what I think we need to do is get Leo, the other piece of the puzzle, in here with me, and we can expand on what I've been talking about today. Clearly, I can do that, but I think it's important to get another perspective. Leo has a
Yeah.
different experience. He works with slightly different client groups to me, so therefore he's got some different ideas, which is great. That's what we need.
What we're
Because as I
getting, what
said,
we're yeah,
yeah, I was
we're
just going to
getting.
say that. Go on, I'm listening.
Sorry, I'm just saying we get his kind of like sound and everything sorted out by next week.
Yeah, I hope so. So, yeah, there's a lot of subjects we can cover relating to grief, relating to loss. They can focus on the human side of it, losing, another human being, or we can focus on the work side of it, or the
Mm.
relationship side. There's so many different areas that come under the umbrella, loosely under the umbrella of loss and grief. I think they're well worth covering. They're not well enough. They're not spoken about well enough. They're not spoken about clearly enough. Yeah, there are some great reports, some great articles, blog posts, books even.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
sometimes,
yeah,
for me, it needs to come from the heart, and we need to share our practical experience with the theory, because that makes it real, and real
Do you
is what
find
people experience.
do you find kind of like reading books, it does help, but really if you have that one-to-one contact, it's much better.
Yeah, definitely. One of my, let's call it a soapbox, and this is a soapbox that I've carried around for a long time. Theory is great. I love to read about the theory, new
Mm,
discoveries, and so on and so forth. But if it doesn't relate to the real world, what good is it? It needs to relate to the real world. People need to understand it. Part of my job and part of Leo's job is enabling the people we work with to get the theory, understand the theory, but relate
mm,
it to what's happening in their world. It
yeah,
needs to
yeah,
relate. If it doesn't relate, it doesn't work. So it's fairly straightforward, really.
yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? It's kind of like we need to kind of like have see people, face to face, you know, or on Zoom or whatever. What we used to do when it was COVID time. You know, people's going through a lot of problems at the moment, aren't they? With grief, dealing with the grief. And I was talking to somebody the other day. They were talking about that suicide is on the up too because as soon as their partner or a family member dies, they want to die.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. I heard that from my own brother a few days ago. That's
Mm,
how he felt. And the knock on of that, in a totally separate conversation, was that his daughter said, if I ever lost my dad, that's how I'd feel. Now, he doesn't know that she said that, and I know that they won't be listening because I've not told them about this link. Um, but that is worrying. What is it that's driving people to feel like that? More and more, it appears. Or is it because it's better reported upon? I don't know. But something is
mm,
driving these things that are happening. Um, and we've got to be aware. This is why I frequently say, talk about it, share it, don't bury it. Because if you do bury it, it's not managing anything. It just makes it worse. It stays inside, it festers, it grows. And I think an
yeah,
important
yeah,
thing to mention as well about wellness, there is, it's known, for example, that if we constantly think something negative, it affects us. It affects our body. It makes us feel ill. It makes us feel weak. It can do a whole range of things. So we need to be aware of our thoughts. Somebody said, be careful what you say to yourself because you are listening. I'll just say that once more. Be careful what you say to yourself because you are listening. So, in other words, what you're
mm,
thinking up here, a part of you is listening and it takes action. And that action can be quite negative and it can be destructive. So, we need to be careful. Now, it's easy for me to
yeah.
jump up and down and bang the table and say we've got to listen, but I think it's important that we do it.
Well, we have got
Uh,
1,946 listeners on the radio. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. So it's that is quite good, really good.
that is wonderful. Thank you. Yes, it's
Yeah,
great to
that is
hear.
really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
But
I think the
my
trouble. Sorry, go on.
no, carry on.
I think the trouble is these days is that it's a stigma there in front of us, isn't it? Because we don't want to talk about um you know grief. We don't want to talk about the loss. We don't want to talk about the grief because we're afraid that it will. It's like it will hurt us. We don't want to go there. We don't want to go to that space where the hurt is. See, we'd rather be in our own comfort zone where okay, I'll do it in a minute, right? So you put it back of your head and you think, oh, that would come later on. You know, um, the funeral's not yet. This is the excuses people. The funeral's not yet, or I get it when it comes along. But really, we need to deal with it, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, we do. And sometimes dealing with it can be done in a kind of humorous way. Now, this is based on something that happened last week, and it's kind of a tradition on my mum's side of the family that when somebody dies, there's a wake, and the wake usually takes place in a pub. So people have a
Mm,
few beers, a glass of wine, whatever they need, and the stories start to flow. The funny stories, the stories that make you want to laugh or and cry because they're so funny. They generate positive memories. And that I think is fantastic. Now, a few people had a problem with that. We shouldn't be celebrating. We shouldn't be kind of having a good time. But I think, on the contrary, we should. It's good to enable it to come out. And okay, you
yeah,
may start with something humorous and it may make you feel sad after some time, but at least you're getting it out there
yeah,
because keeping it inside, we do pop. We are like pressure cookers. Occasionally we can blow, so let's not.
yeah.
Let's
Let's
try
not
to
blow,
share.
eh? Yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you so
that's
much. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
But to those listeners that you just talked about, Steve, I just want to remind them about the good questions. Ask questions. Please, please ask questions. Ask plenty of questions. If you send us questions that are going to take an hour to answer, fantastic, because it'll get you your answers and it'll get a lot of other people their answers too. So please don't hesitate. Questions are a good thing, and they don't make us feel challenged or awkward. So let's go with it. So I have very little else to offer today, I'm afraid. I can talk about anything you like. I know we've got about 8 minutes to the top of the hour.
Yeah, yeah.
So here's another exercise. I shared that looking at the sky exercise earlier. With the whole idea of looking at the sky, like I said, is to enable us to ground, to be centered, and live and hang out in the present moment, so we're not drifting off thinking of what might have been or what could be, and so on, or what could have been better. So that's the whole point of it. But another one, a really simple one, you can do it where you're sitting right now. Uh, and the first thing to do, like I did earlier, is to focus on breathing. So get a nice, easy flow of breath in through the nose, usually for me. Hold the breath and let the breath out through the mouth. And I do the count of about the same for each one. So it could be 4 seconds, for example. So 4 seconds hold, breathe in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds breathe out. And get a nice, steady stream of breath going. Now, once you feel that steady stream of breath, look for a color in your room. Any color, not a favorite particularly, just a color. And right in front of me is a lemon wall. So that's going to be my color, lemon. And I'm going to look around the room and find some more lemon or similar. It doesn't need to be exactly the same. There's a picture from my grandson and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 lemony colors on there. And there's a little mobile over there that's got 2 or 3 lemony colors. So I can just follow the room, look at things in the room. There's another lemon up there and there's another one over there on a card. So I can pick out all these lemons. That's all I'm doing. I'm just focused on picking out the same or very similar color. Behind me over there, there's some sunflowers, kind of lemony orange, I guess. So there's lots of lemon around. That's all I'm doing. I'm focusing on the breathing, finding the color. Focus on the breathing, finding the color. I'm not judging the color. I'm not saying, oh no, that wall needs painting. It's just what it is. It is what it is. No judgment required. So concentrating on picking out the color and focusing on breathing. That helps bring us back into the present moment, right here, right now. So think about it like this. If you're grieving and thinking about how hurt you are, for example, something you lost something, maybe a person passed, maybe you lost a job or whatever. So you're grieving over something. what we tend to do is think about what could have been or what is going to be because of what's happened. And those things are all out here. They're not here. They're not in this present moment. We may be thinking them in this present moment, but we're off thinking about the future or thinking about the past. But life happens right here, right now. Life can't happen in the future. We've not got there yet. Life can't happen in the past. We've been there, done that, moved on. But that's what tends to happen when we start to worry, when we start to stress and feel anxious over something that we're grieving over. So think it through on those terms. If you need help, that typically comes from something called mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't voodoo or sitting on a cushion meditating. It's about living here right now. There's a famous writer, a German writer and speaker. He's from Germany, and he says, "Be here now." That's not his quote originally, but he uses it. Be here now. That's important, because if we can be here now, the grief and the loss that we've experienced is easier to manage, because here and now we can do something about it. We can ask a question, we can look for support, we can look for help, we can talk about it with somebody who matters, with a friend, with somebody who can listen. Listening is a whole other subject, and maybe we'll cover that another time. So this has been our first show. Myself and Leo. Leo is just a name at the bottom of the screen. What's the point in stressing over it? It's all down to experience. It's all part of the way things are. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to speaking to you really soon, as in next week, 2 o'clock UK time. If you want to send any messages in the meantime, please don't hesitate. So you can send them to myself or Leo via facebook.com/Steve P. Costello. That's Steve, S-T-E-V-E, P. Costello, C-O-S-T-E-L-L-O. Or you can email Leo Farberg, that's LEOFAERBERG @gmail.com. Or myself, Steve Exgro @gmail.com. That's Steve, STEVEEXGRO @gmail.com. Or you can get us both on WhatsApp. For me, I'm a Brit. I live in France. Is ++33 767 545 557, or Leo ++7 909 170 1010. You can use the same numbers for Telegram as well, I believe. I do use Telegram, but only the clients who use it. So, you want to use that, you're welcome. Okay. Anyway, I wish you all a wonderful week. Remember, ask those great questions. Keep asking them. Don't hesitate. You'll always get some response. There's no such thing as a bad question. Have a wonderful week. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.